Friends, welcome back to Epic Block of the Month. We are on month number 3 and we're going to actually build all 4 blocks for the center. It's going to be super fun, lots to do. Are you ready? Let's get started. Welcome back, folks, to the Epic Block of the Month. My name is Rob Appell from Stitch in Heaven out in Quitman, Texas. And yes, we are working on this epic Block of the Month quilt designed by my good friend Charisma Horton, and we are using the fantastic fabrics from Benartex, fabrics I designed called New and Newer Worlds. And we are going to be working on all 4 blocks this month that make the center star. I've got 2 up on the wall, the parts and pieces to walk you through, and we're going to finish this out together today. For all of these, now we won't be able to necessarily sew them together because we're going to make all of the blocks for the next 12 months together, and then we'll go ahead and assemble the quilt. But exactly, this is what we're working on. And the fun part of today's block is there's several new kinds of sewing we're going to do, plus it's the same thing over and over again. So really, if some of this is new, maybe you want to try it once, because we're going to be working on some pretty small little stuff here. But we're also working on stuff we've done before already. So this is a really great month. And like I said, each of the blocks are the exact same. So we're going to work on them, and maybe you want to chain piece them. Maybe you want to do them one at a time, or the first 2 like I did to improve your design and skill and direction following maybe. And then go ahead and do the next 2. Now, one thing I will point out for us today using the pattern, don't forget, you have all of the fabrics named and color coded and everything here on page 2 of your printed pattern. You need to get your printed pattern from Charisma or one of your wonderful local retailers out there. We are also working on page 7 today. We're working on page 8, and like we did last month, there is a paper piecing option as well. If you downloaded your pattern, make sure that you're doing a quick test 1-inch square there up on your test print to make sure that your paper pieces are the right size pieces. Now we're going to do our standard patchwork method today. I think a lot of you will enjoy that as well, but for you paper piecers, those are obviously available. Super great. Like I said, I've raced ahead a little bit other than getting my iron started. So I do have a good feel for these 2 blocks. This is going to be super fun. And as I'm clearing the deck here for ourselves to get ourselves a little reorganized, we're going to start here on this square. You see 2 of them per block, so we will be making 8 of them. No problems. And we've made this kind of square already in the past, right? So we're going to start by joining our black center to our 2 white sides here. And the other thing I was starting to point out as well is this might be the month to have your slotted trimmers handy, or your block locks. We've got lots of half square triangles to be trimming down this time, and you may want to have that available. I've got a 1/4 inch seam guide for myself, and I mark it with my wash tape here, or my seam tape, excuse me. That way I always can move it in and out. I love that little trick. And again, if you were making all of these that you need for the actual all 4 blocks, you'd probably want to chain pieces right now. I'm going to finish up today with just this last one for you because I got a little carried away and just enjoyed my sewing and kept on sewing. And so I actually almost oversewed this week, this month, this day for us. Okay. Now, mostly just because of the color effect here, I'm going to press from my light fabric in towards my dark fabric. I'm just going to set that iron there on that white, push it over, not too far that it hits the other side, and again. Now we're going to add on our long strips on both sides like this. And as I said, we will need 8 of these. They'll all finish trimmed down if you need at 4.5 inches square. Now with these, I'm going to go ahead and I tried earlier to press towards the inside, but it was just so bulky that I'm just going to let a little bit of that fabric push over, a little bit of that fabric color show through. It's not going to ever show up in this big and bold of a quilt anyways. So at any rate, like I said, we need 8 of these made up. Set those aside, and now that was right here in our step 2. We're going to bounce down in here to step 4, and what we've already done here is we're making these really cool but do pay attention. There's two different directions going on. We're going to make these kind of bar blocks with these snowballs. Real easy to do, and you're going to do that by taking all of your gray squares that you had cut following the instructions, right? Or maybe you're using one of our kits, and you're going to draw a diagonal line. Now, one of the things that you should be aware of is you're doing these in pairs. You're going to need 2 per block, so 8 again. And let's go ahead and make sure we just lay them out in pairs also. So right sides together right now. Here. And then I'm going to lay them down so that I can see my chalk lines are actually pointing and making a bit of a peak. Make sense? Okay. For this, we do want to move our edge guide out of the way if you're using such a thing, or if you've got a seam guide on the side of your foot. So now what we're going to do though, and this is different than before, folks. Before we were sewing with a 1/4 inch on either side. Now we're going to sew right down this chalk line. So I'm just going to go ahead and look through the toes of my pressing foot, sewing foot there, following that chalk line right through. So mark them in pairs, sew them all at once. And then the next step, we're going to go ahead, just trim them and press them. Do make sure you know where you're cutting away from the bulk of the rectangle, and just go ahead and set yourself down with a nice 1/4 inch seam allowance. Protect your finger. And yes, folks, that is a big enough scrap that you could have already stitched another seam allowance on there, or you definitely could set those aside for later. Sometimes when we're doing a lot of this trim and fall off, those pieces are really small, but this method here does leave a little bit of extra that we haven't accounted for in this pattern. So you might want to do something fun with that on your own. And for these, I really like to press down into the larger fabric or into the purple today. So I'm going to set that iron on the gray, let that do the work. And I'm going to do the same here, even though it's heading in the opposite direction. Okay, so you're going to set those aside. We have, like I said, lots of little constructions to be doing, and set those aside also in pairs just for easy organization later on. All right, let's see what's next on our instructions today. Okay, so we finished that out in step 5 by the trim, the press. Now what we're going to do is we're going to do a series of half square triangles so that we can build down to get to this unit here. This unit, as you can see here, is kind of the beginning. We just made these cool pieces and these pieces. So we're going to make all of the half square triangles down to this little unit. We're going to have 3 new sizes we're doing. And I kind of prepped them all in advance following step 7, 8, and 9 if you want to do it that way. Mostly meaning that I just took the time to draw my chalk line on the green fabrics as necessary. So I'm going to match up a green and pink here. For these larger half square triangles, of course, we're going to match up the green and the purple, right sides together, and then hopefully you can still see there's a diagonal line drawn there. And then you'll also have the one to do with your small blue and pink squares. Not your smallest pink squares, but your almost smallest pink squares. And now with these chalk lines, like in the other 2 months, and not like what we just did, we are going to use those as our sewing guideline versus our sewing line. So 1/4 inch on either side. And one of the fun things about this, because it's the same style technique no matter what size we're doing, is I am going to go ahead and chain piece again all of these just to save a little thread, save a little time. So no matter what size, I'm going to sew down all of the, we're going to call it left-hand side of the line. Cut that thread. And of course, you have many more multiples than I do because, well, I don't want to brag, but I've got some of my stuff already done. All right, spin those around. So you're looking at the chalk line just like you were again. So on the other side, so yes, 2 stitch lines on each set of squares. I mean, you've done this so many times, right? But you love it, and that's why you're here today, and that is what makes this project epic. Actually, I think what makes this project epic is Charisma designed it, and it's pretty epic. I mean, the last one she designed was fabulous, but this one is epic for sure. All right. Now that these are prepped, I'm going to use my slotted trimmer for these, folks, and I really do like the slotted trimmer for this reason. First, what we want to do is we want to use a tool bigger than each square to Separate the two half square triangles, but don't press them if you're using a slotted trimmer. If you're using a block lock or you're using your standard trim methods, you would press. So this is one of the things I like is with the slotted trimmers, it seems to save a few steps and be pretty dang accurate if you ask me. Okay, so now what we're going to do, let's start with our bigger ones, and those are going to be trimmed down to 4.5. Take your 4.5 line, lay it right on your thread, and look, and it doesn't take much of a trim. So I'm just going to line it up kind of centered there. Trim, trim. Like I said, not much. And you know, folks, I do struggle getting my rulers into those slots. So I've learned I can actually just dog ear, and that's the other benefit there, right? I can dog ear that on my own. So, okay, 4.5s on the big ones. And that one is just about spot on. It is. Okay, there isn't a lot of wiggle room with the pieces as they were cut. Next size down, 2.5. Trim, trim, same thing. 2.5 again. And then the smallest ones here will be 1.5s. And to me, this is actually when I think this tool really starts to become nice, because the smaller they get, the harder it is for me personally to manipulate that on the table while using the diagonal. And so anyways, I've become a big fan of this slotted trimmer. It's pretty cool. Okay, scraps aside for later. Now we're just going to go ahead. Oh, I forgot to dog ear those. We're going to dog ear the small ones just the same. And again, I find that that's almost easier for me to manipulate. It takes a little practice, but after enough half square triangles, you too will get good at it. Go ahead now and press these all to the same color fabrics. Okay, so press to the greens where you can, and then press to the blues on the other smaller pieces. This is going to help everything come together even nicer in the end. And now we actually have all of our units built down, even the smallest, so we can begin construction of our entire block. And we're going to start building from the small side out. Okay, so we are going, like I said, to make one of these first. But what I like to do in this instance, even though all of the blocks are universal, and it will make it really nice because they are universal, all of them can be rotated, let's just follow as the diagram looks. So I'm going to take my white smallest square and my pink square, and they're diagonal from each other. Then my blue or turquoise pieces are going to come in and they're going to touch each other there. We're making a 4-patch, so I'm going to sew this seam together, then that seam. Do that now. Oh, and before I even get started, let's make sure we're doing very accurate 1/4 inch seam allowances, especially on these wee small pieces, because remember, there's not as much extra to play with. And again, you can obviously do this in a chain piece format, as long as you make sure you keep your orientation correct. But because things are so small, I am going to press as I go. And on these, I'm going to press into the square, just easier because of the seam allowances. Okay, I'm going to press over into the square here, even though it's white. And then that should allow me here, when I bring this back together, to nest my seams. They're so small. Kind of sloppy too. Sorry. Hope you're not watching, Charisma. Oh, no, kidding. It's not that bad. Not that bad. Press it over. And then again, this is the beginning of it all. Okay, so that little piece there, we're going to start with. Now we're going to go ahead and make sure you have your orientation correct again. White kind of in this upper left corner. Now its opposite is the solid green square. We're going to bow tie it out again with those pink squares coming in here. Easy matchup. To the ironing board to press again. Whenever I have the opportunity, I'm going to try to press here into this square. And so if I want to nest those seams, I might need to take a moment and think about, okay, how's that going to really look? What have I really done to myself? I think I just did it wrong. Oh, there. Nope, I did it right. Okay, so now that seam's going that way, which means I do have to press this into all of that little seams. Oh my goodness. I don't know if it's going to work or not. We'll do it our best. Okay, at least I have the layout right again. I was starting to panic there, folks. I wasn't sure what I had done wrong, but I sure thought I did. So did you notice that? I had brought the wrong row back in on top is what I really did wrong. So the piecing was correct, but my orientation was wrong. So make sure you're keeping those little pink parts, right? Make sure all your pink parts are gonna look just right. Because like I said, this is what we're going for. Now let's press away from some of that bulk patchwork, and we're ready to start to build out the rest of our block units. Okay, so we've gotten these constructed, okay? So now what we're gonna do is we're just gonna take this on the table. Pretty easy, just make yourself a little extra space. And then you're gonna take and you're gonna bring in those half square triangles. So the greens touch, and the greens touch into here, and then one of your black and white square and squares. Okay, so that's the next series of patchwork, kind of 4x4 again, or 2x2 4-patch style. Lay it here. Oh, and I'm going to take this opportunity to always cross my seams when I can. So I was starting to grab it there just habitually, but I'm going to rotate this so that I can sew across there to secure as many seams as soon as possible. Okay. Just a little quilter's trick here for you today. That doesn't change what's happening up here, so I'm just going to grab that. And again, pressing after each seam. I'm going to press into the half square triangles so that I know that I can where to press to make that nesting happen again. Double checking that I have my white opposite my corner so that everything is still on track. Stitch this so I'm looking at as much patchwork as possible to avoid folding seams under any of that stuff that could happen. We are making a quilt here, and we're going to check to make sure that all that seam allowance is lined up as it's supposed to, nesting those seams. This is a very fun block to make. I like it when we have a lot of different parts and pieces. Now we're going to start to add on the excess outer parts, okay? And for this, really what happens here, make sure you grab a pair, right? So that they're opposites to each other. Make sure you have those opposites. Okay, now you want to really focus on what's going on. So I'm going to rotate just like you see here in your instructions on step 13. Take and rotate it so, like we've been doing, our white point is out. Now I'm going to have a gray running out this way, so my purple lines kind of feel like they're running parallel. And then this gray is going to do here, and that's going to also give that parallel effect. And then we're going to put in one more of those last squares. So our sewing construction is actually going to be this seam here. And so again, I rotated it to capture those edges. Let's do that now. Sometimes I gotta be forceful. We're gonna press away from the white fabric just for appearance. Now we're going to sew this kind of rectangle to the square. Again, different than we've done in the past. I think this is a pretty cool technique. Make sure your corners match up. And now, because I've pressed up this way, I want to press down this way. Again, just to help align some of those seams. I love that trick of nesting our seams. And that'll be the final seam for this block. And like I said, we just have 4 of these total to make. Now you'll have 4, I'll only have 1, and I'm almost done with that one as well. Yeah, it didn't take long at all, see? And like I said, we're going to go ahead and press this last part over. And now, congratulations, and do take yourself the time to at least enjoy putting them up on the design wall, all 4 of them, and looking at them. We won't be able to sew them together yet because we do want to construct all of the blocks before we start putting together any of the rows or columns or whatnot. But doesn't that look cool together? Here, let's move this one over and everything. Oh, fantastic. I'm so excited. There it is. Super great. And please, folks, let us know in the comments below how you're doing on this epic quilt by Charisma Horton from the Little Pink Barn using Benetex's new and New Worlds fabrics by yours truly, Rob Appell from Stitchin' Heaven. And we will see you next month. Folks, I shouldn't tell you how easy next month is going to be, but next month is going to be pretty easy, and I'll see you then. Thanks for being here.